And welcome to a Peel Yourself Off the Mat Monday edition of Bury Your Bookie. I'm Jeff DeForest, joined as always on these Mondays, and it's always a pleasure to shoot the breeze with one Mike Jones, who is always involved in a variety of different things. We have live sporting action as we speak. We do this thing early in the morning on the East Coast, and especially so for your West Coast viewers and people around the world, but it's already late in the afternoon in Europe, and Wimbledon is underway, which is one of my favorite events. I know you're a big tennis fan, Mike Jones, and seemed to me like there was a possibility of some first round upsets. I didn't track exactly where they were all going to occur, but this is a great event because just like we talked about at the French Open, where the red clay is like quicksand for a lot of players and it can be the great equalizer, grass may be even more peculiar of a handicapping surface. It's kind of like when horses change tracks, and you're thinking that this is going to have an impact on the race because certain horses for courses certainly stands up over the years of handicapping. And there are players that are very adept at playing on the grass that might be complete unknowns out of the Bob Dylan category. And some of the good players often are tripped up in the early rounds of the tournament. First of all, how are you? And second of all, are you already involved early in the morning in wagering on Wimbledon by any chance?
Yeah, you kind of look for some fun dogs. I think you're onto something there. There are upsets that happen in these first round matches, so you could find it. You got to find the right website that provides you these long distant odds. A lot of them only put games up, or one. You got to win by 2.5 sets. So they don't give you these sometimes big underdogs because books don't want to take them. But yeah, it's just a great time again. First round Wimbledon, every court's going in the 90s, extreme heat. So that could be something that players are going to kind of fiddle around with. It doesn't get 90 very often in Wimbledon, in London, I'm sorry. But yeah, so it's an interesting tournament. Another great event. If anything matches the final we had at Roland Garros between Sinner and Alcaraz, I'm just hoping we're on a collision course to see that match on grass. A lot faster surface, probably benefits the big heavy hitters. So if you want to look at something, there's a game match coming up here with two very heavy guys, with Perricard, who's a monster serve, hits at 140 from France, going up against Taylor Fritz in the first round. Sure, the ESPN will cover that well, so you can get up this morning and get some action, maybe take a shot at a dog there. Taylor Fritz, an accomplished grass court player, hits it hard, but Perricard could give him a challenge. Maybe think it goes 5 sets, taking a bet something like that.
You get weird matchups. In fact, there's a match going on right now. Carlos Alcaraz, obviously the favorite, along with Sinner. I think Alcaraz is slightly favored over
Mm-hmm.
Sinner in this one after that epic battle they had in the French Open. And you're thinking at this stage of men's tennis, those two guys are in a parenthetical and have separated themselves from even all of the other great players that are
Mm-hmm.
involved. You're naturally inclined to believe that either Sinner or Alcaraz is somehow going to come out on top. And then he's in there with like one of these guys, an oddball type like Fognini, the Italian who's been around forever, but is not incapable of pulling off a surprise. He actually has the lead currently as we're speaking here, and although he's about to be evened up in the first set.
Mm-hmm.
Impossible, we are thinking going in, but not out of the question completely, even in a matchup like that. Tough though in the men's side to pull off these monumental upsets because if you give Alcaraz a chance, even if he loses the first set or as he did in the French Open, the first two against Sinner, he's still alive because you got a 3 out of 5 on the
Right.
men's side, and you might find some upsets, especially on the women's draw, because it didn't look like they were all gimmies in the first round matches. So kind of an interesting thing to see. That pales in comparison to a couple of things that I've been dead wrong about, Mike Jones, and I would have lost my ass every penny that I had. I can't believe that. Now, are you inclined to bet on things that are voted on, like MVPs or MVP of the final series in a championship run, World Series MVPs, season bets that involve awards? Are you inclined to do any of that? Because
You know,
it's so
since
subjective.
I will tell you this: since the past return, and you have two of the biggest operators being FanDuel and DraftKings, who were all props and all fantasy sports. These bets now become way more important to them, pushing them, as well as a younger player, younger generational better looking at other ways to bet. And I am not one that digs into these deep down props for MVP or amount of yards for players, seasonal props, but I know that I research them a lot more than I ever have, just to have knowledge on what really is going on and if there are advantages. Because remember this, for us trying to bury bookies, tough to set a line on 15 games, 16 games on an NFL Sunday, let alone 5,000 different lines on props on every game and all that. So there is advantage, and I think bettors are out there and algorithms are out there trying to find these bets. So I think there might be some player advantage to the things you're talking about.
I'm a boxing fan, as you know, and the people may know after viewing the show here for the last, I think we've been on for about a year with Bury Your Bookie.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've seen my share of outrageous decisions in boxing. Scorecards that were so far out of whack. You can't imagine that the judge wasn't suspended. Of course, the classic being Melvina Lathan, Adelaide Bird. I don't know that this is meant to be disparaging against women judges, but it seems like they're always involved in the most outrageous of decisions, although there have been many blind men that have been involved, including my favorites, Jose Feliciano, Stevie Wonder, and Helen Keller that were calling fights and scoring fights for many years in Vegas. But wow, I don't know that I've ever seen a bigger travesty of justice than this general manager of the year in the National Hockey League. You have Bill Zito of the Florida Panthers, two-time back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, who's made any number of outrageously startling maneuvers right at the trade deadline. He did it again this year. He took Seth Jones off somebody's roster, and everybody was thankful that he did, thinking that this guy, you'd be better off putting skates on his father, Popeye, to get results. And then he got Brad Marchand from the Boston Bruins, now highly coveted, that he's become a free agent. All of a sudden, you have many teams interested in him. He's done this year after year. He's won back-to-back Stanley Cups, been to the Stanley Cup Finals 3 years in a row. And yet, that being said, he does not win General Manager of the Year to the guy named Jim Nils, who was with the Dallas Stars. Now, granted, the Stars were a good team this year, made it for the third year in a row to the Western Conference Finals, where they lost. They ended up firing their coach. So you have one guy that clearly had his season end in total despair to the point where Peter DeBoer, with a good resume and coach it, made it to 3 straight Western Conference Finals also, usually enough to get you by in terms of honoring the rest of your contract, at least. They fire him, and somehow the voters left Bill Zito out, and they gave it to Nils for the third year in a row. I would have lost every dime I had in my pocket on that particular thing. Thank God. I'm glad you're telling me that you're not inclined to do this, but things that are voted on are definitely suspect. When it comes to any kind of wagering, watch out, people. That would be a warning I hope you would adhere to.
Yeah, Academy Awards, draft picks, all that stuff. You just don't know what information leaks and why odds are what they are. You know, I remember having the one Academy Award they announced wrong when they gave it to Moonlight, and then they announced that it wasn't Moonlight, it was someone else. I mean, it's just, you just don't know about that stuff. So I prefer to have my eye test and watch what I see on the field. It's hard enough to do that, let alone if they put their hands in other people's who aren't athletes. I'd rather bet on what I think I know all the time and not some guy who has a bad opinion.
Yeah, and anybody that was watching this Jake Paul fight, which I saw some highlights.
Yeah,
I don't know if you would call them highlights. How long is the public going to be duped into thinking that, look, Jake Paul, I'll give him this. If he was a guy that was, and I've done a lot of these fights where a guy makes his pro debut in a 4-round prelim, and if you saw this guy, you would say, I don't know, he's not going anywhere, but at least he gave it an effort.
right.
That didn't look like a total disaster as some of the fights that, if you guys ever get a chance, Google the worst boxer ever. And a young DeForest happened to be on a call as we saw a guy that was so bad. I mean, it was one of the biggest disgraces in the history of the game, where this guy took on a house fighter who was 1-0 in his pro debut. And literally, as I said during the call, it looked like Rock'em Sock'em Robots. I don't know that I've ever seen a guy misrepresent the game as badly as that. But wow, for people, I mean, is this? We were talking about this on Friday with the professor. I don't know. In your opinion, Mike Jones, you're a diehard old school sports fan.
Mm-hmm.
Is it good for the game to have this kind of farcical circus-like event taking place and capturing the eyeballs of the younger generation?
Yeah, here it is.
It's going to be something that leads to its destruction.
Let's. I'm going to take devil's advocate on you here and say, here's where Jake Paul gets this going. Well, number one, he's a decent athlete. Number two, everybody's seen him grow up on YouTube videos and all that.
Yeah.
And now he goes into something with a brash attitude that people dream of. You dream of being heavyweight champion of the world. Here he
Yeah.
is trying to fulfill this. The average guy who just gets himself in shape, has a little athleticism, and runs it into a mini career. I think it's kind of fascinating. He's not fighting the greatest of fighters. He's not getting in there with Terrence Crawford or Canelo, but it's kind of interesting. I'm not paying for it. I just like to hear the results and see the interviews. You know, it's all like watching Muhammad Ali or pro
Circus.
wrestling, Ric
Yeah.
Flair do the interviews. I mean, I heard him get on Piers Morgan the other day and just basically torch Piers Morgan about his show and everything. And all he said, I'm only on here to get people to buy pay-per-views. I could care less. And then I take that instance of that interview and take it to Floyd Mayweather, who I think is one of the most misunderstood athletes of all time. I had dinner, not with him, but at a table next to him, and a couple times in a place in Vegas where we live close to each other. And he couldn't have been nicer. He would talk to you, do everything you think he's like portrays on TV. He's nothing like that when you get him in person. He's got a good group of guys around him. These bodyguards that look like they're thugs are not. And I've always found it. Then I got invited to watch him train before the Manny Pacquiao fight. And then I see how great a athlete and boxer he is. And he never gets hit. So to me, I'm always enamored by Floyd Mayweather. So I think it's all this, trying to get hype for your event. I think people bought the pay-per-views for Floyd to hate him, to watch him lose, not to root for him. And I was the other way around. So I am a Floyd Mayweather fan and proudly admit it. Don't know if I'm a Jake Paul boxing fan, but I think there's a story behind this that makes it interesting. I would like to see him fight a little bit higher level fighter, maybe a guy who was in the top 20 in some way and maybe closer to his weight and see what happens. But I think he's got a brand and let him go. I don't have to watch it. No one else has to watch it, but I think it's an intriguing story. But I agree with you. As a boxing purist, it's kind of, we don't like to really see it that way.
Yeah, strictly show business, no doubt.
Right.
But I would be afraid for him if he got in there with any kind of real competitive boxer, because I think it would be early lights out if he got in there with a guy who was currently in the game. I mean, he gets in there with a guy like Bivol or one of these fighters that's on the scene today, a guy who beat Canelo Alvarez, and the party would be quickly over, and that destroyed a myth. But he can't afford to do that, otherwise the campaign wouldn't possibly continue. All right, interesting story. I don't know what you make of this, because I remember a long time ago when I was first starting out, I was trying to get some writing samples together so I could get a newspaper or magazine job, and I interviewed a Salty Dog old general manager named Harry Dalton, who had made his claim to fame legendary type of status with the Baltimore Orioles, but at the time was the GM of the then California Angels. And I'll never forget this. He said to me, the one thing that we have to convince people of, people have to believe that the game is on the level. He was talking about the integrity of the sport and this, that. It wasn't really related to Pete Rose. We didn't have that story out there then. But he was talking about, and this is way before this wave of gambling influence came into the game, and everybody, and you've been talking about this, that this could create a lot of controversy, maybe even a lot of litigation down the road from fans and bettors that are assuming that there was something fugazi about what went on. So what do you make of this Malik Beasley story that's surfaced now? Where I don't know. I mean, there are no charges yet. Just has come out that he's under investigation for like the last 18 months. I know, unfortunately, firsthand that the feds take their time in these kind of circumstances, but yeah, I mean, where does that leave you? Does it leave you feeling like, hey, wait a minute, man? There's a lot more going on here than meets the eye in terms of players that are involved and arranging certain things to happen. Now we've seen it with referees, or we've seen it with players. We've seen it more on a college level. We've seen it in the pros with Porter, where he was tanking individual stats and pulling himself out of games. How does that strike you? That whole story with Malik Beasley, if at all?
You'd have to look at the details of what happened. I mean, it's really tough, but I heard a pretty good conversation on VSiN yesterday where the bookmaker, the head of the bookmaker at Borgata, was talking about this one in particular incident and what it does. He brings up a good point that it's just prominent now because there's so many more operators and there's more people involved in betting. But when this happened before, and he assumed that it did, it's the underground. Other than Nevada would be the only state that would be interested in investigating this. So now, because you have all these different states involved and people can get involved, and I think it's kind of this. But again, the regulatory bodies have to find a way to control this, because this is really what you're saying, the ethics. The questions would be, what does Beasley do in the interview with the NBA? What does he do if the law comes in? Who prosecutes this? How do you do it? Did he miss the shots on purpose, or did he do something to pull out from injury? I go back to the Steph Curry injury when Fanatics gave back $500,000 in tickets because Steph got hurt early and people had over. So if you could find a way to not rip off the public, you're going to see less and less of this reported. But again, to these players, that I know for a fact that these guys somehow dabble in this. Why do you need? This guy's about ready to sign a $40 million contract and he's going to get involved in something like this? Doesn't make any sense. And hopefully truth comes out that he did not do anything wrong. But again, you just don't know. You have to wait for the facts to unfold.
Yeah, you hate to see these kind of things, and you wonder how widespread it might be that is going undetected.
Mm-hmm.
When and look, the people that are involved in taking book, the bookies, the very same bookies, are trying to bury. They're well aware of oddball betting trends, and especially back in the day in tennis when some obscure Russian doubles team would have an enormous amount of money come in that they would lose the first point of the match.
Right.
And now you do have limitations placed on.
Right, and when you default, so to that same point, I knew the Russian mob was involved in men's tennis in the '90s, and some players would end up losing matches. They're like, "How could he lose this guy?" Finally, they end up faking injuries because they couldn't. The guy was so bad that they had to lose to. They couldn't do it. Then all of a sudden, now if you have an injury, you default. It's a no bet. So tennis corrected that way of gambling where now if a player gets hurt, the bet's off the board. So even if you have a winner in games or something, as soon as it hurts, everything goes injury. Everybody goes away if the player defaults due to injury, which I think is the right way to do it. They'll figure it out. I mean, these are smart people that do this and regulate this industry. So I think they'll be fine.
All right, I've been casting aspersions for a long time at our hometown baseball team, the now Miami Marlins, former Florida Marlins. They have a couple of World Championships, and other than that, for the most part, they've been complete garbage. The franchise in disarray. They have an owner that many stipulate doesn't own the shirt on his back, so they don't have any money to invest. They brought in a guy from the Rays, Peter Bendix. I referred to him as possibly have been being a bat boy with the Rays organization because nothing was happening that seemed of a positive nature. A friend of mine said to me early in the season when they got off to a somewhat promising start, I think they were 8-8 or something like that through the first 16 games, somewhere around 500, which was a shocker in and of itself. He said, these guys can hit a little bit. And usually it's the reverse. When you go through a tanking situation and you're constantly trading for prospects, you're trying to find possibly 3 pitchers that can be in your rotation that can keep you in some games, and you hope to scratch out a few runs and some victories, maybe finish 500 with some level of respectability. But what do you make of this 7-game winning streak? They're the hottest team in baseball right now, 8-2 in their last 10. It appears to me, I mean, they have to be eclipsing the over in virtually every game. They have had really legitimate baseball players on their roster at different times during their history, which goes back to '93. So we're talking 32 years. I mean, they've had home run hitters like Stanton, Marcell Ozuna, Gary Sheffield. They've had their share of illustrious bats in the lineup. And yet this team is shattering records, franchise records, with this recent road trip. Are you ready to jump on that bandwagon? And have you been inclined to take a few overs, to sniff on a few overs in these Marlin games? Because now that I said that, they probably go back to getting shut out for the next 6 games. But it's been a pretty remarkable run, and it just shows you that something can pop up at virtually any time, just as you're ready to throw in the towel on a team. In this case, all of a sudden they get hot.
So it started on Monday. They get out to San Francisco, or Tuesday. San Francisco off a long road trip, which, I have a tendency to like teams, bet against teams that come off the long road trip. Yep. So I'm like, you get 180 with the Marlins. Take a crack. Over 3.5 team total runs, 2 winners. Take a chance. I'm not a fan of Verlander. He's over, say 2. You know what? I'm looking the next day. They're getting plus 160. Why not? They just won a game last night. Take them again. Then I go against the sweep and give it all back as the Marlins put up a 12 spot and come out firing, winning 5-0 in the second inning. And I'm like, man, this team's hitting. Now they're going to Arizona. Right? They're struggling with some of their pitching. And I'm like, you know what? They're missing Carroll. Why not go after game 1, getting 180? Sure enough, they win again, putting up 9 runs, 8 runs. Team total 6 for 6. Underdog prices 6 for 6. Guys are trying to tell me take Arizona. They're not going to get swept. And I'm like, not after what I'm watching. So if you watch these teams, and this is what I look for, the Angels earlier on, I'm on the Marlins. You got to find these edges when teams look like they should win and they're find a little struggle and you get them. I mean, the Giants lost 2 out of 3 to the White Sox. Now they're going to play the Diamondbacks, in the series this week. I think there's value all over the place in baseball, and this was a week that I looked at the Marlins as a top-notch team as I was giving them out, and I got a little lucky, and that's what you got to find. It's not necessarily betting the Yankees. I mean, probably the most fascinating stat I heard yesterday, and it made me go the other way, was the Yankees have been unders in 16 straight games. That is unheard of. And then sure enough, yesterday I tell a buddy of mine, the line's 10.5. How could a team be 10.5 on a total that's played under 16 in a row? I said it's going over today, 12-5. And that's what you're finding. You're finding that my buddy has a line that says, the minute they bring it all up to the attention, it looks too obvious, the day it's going to lose. It's like Mike Breen saying he said 18 free throws in a row and he bricks the 19th.
Sure.
It happens more often than not that when you're analyzing the psychological part of betting, which I'm getting more and more into, instead of the numbers, it's like, what happens? And now, the guy from Borgata was talking about people who bet the A's. They were betting the Yankees on Saturday. The A's win 7-0. What about the under? Well, after about 10 in a row, they started betting the under. Now we're getting a lot of money on the under 10.5 today. So as soon as you hear these things as a lifelong gambler and knowing both sides, this is when you start thinking things have changed. So here's a pick for you right now for tomorrow.
Beautiful.
I'm on the Twins against the Marlins. Right now, I'm thinking they had the 6 in a row. Now they come back. Everybody's on their high horse. Here come the Twins who just got shelled. They look like they can't hit a baseball last night against Schoolball, and I watched the Twins go ahead and take the Marlins, and now you're confused again. That would be my play. I'm on the Twins tomorrow for sure.
Screwball has been unbelievable.
Fantastic.
The Detroit Tigers, I believe, best record in baseball, which
Yep.
isn't drawing the kind of attention that you think that it should. Because
Yep.
and I was watching an interview with one of their players last night, and they asked him about that, and he nonchalantly, as you would imagine, most ball players would say, "Well, we don't pay a whole lot of attention to that. We just go out there to try and win and have fun." But wow, I mean, you're missing out because there's always this attraction to the top name teams: Yankees, Dodgers, Red Sox, Braves in the past, and maybe not so much this year. But yeah, Detroit has been remarkable, and that was one of your big thoughts before the
Yep.
season that Detroit was going to have a real good year. Anything on the slate tonight that you're looking at, Mike Jones?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at there's a real fun story if you're a New York fan, and if you're the Mets. So the Mets have this team meeting. Players only meeting for a couple hours, started to right the ship Saturday night after an embarrassing 9-2 loss to the Pirates. And what happened yesterday? They lose even worse. They lose 12-1. And my buddy sits there and tells me, hey, when everybody calls me up and says, you got to have the Mets today because they had that team players only meeting, he immediately calls me and says, take the Pirates. And this is the psychological edge. Would it work? Well, now the Pirates get rid of the Mets. The worst 3-game losing loss in a series for the Mets, outscored 30-4. Last time it was, and they gave up more than 26 runs. It was 1962 in the series, the opening year of the Mets. So the Mets are in disarray. Well, here come the red hot Cardinals into play Pittsburgh. Cardinals get a sweep over Cleveland. I'm kind of liking the Pirates. I mean, the Cardinals a little bit tonight against the Pirates. They got rid of the Mets. Now they're on their high horse. Here come the Cards, who I think are the better team and were playing really good baseball. And over-under of only 75.5 look like they're going to go way over that total. St. Louis has always been a baseball town, a good organization. I thought that total was kind of low, but they didn't really look like they had pieces this year. And now, sure enough, mid-season, I think you're probably looking at 86.5, 87.5 total. So if you had over 75.5, you're probably in pretty good shape with the Cardinals. So I like them tonight. And, I'm going to go out. The Orioles have been on a little bit of a pace, a little hot streak. You had to look at Seattle and Texas playing 3 extra inning games. Who knows where the pens are on both these teams with the extra innings. So the Orioles playing good ball, get 2 out of 3 from a very hot Tampa team that came in, put up a 22 spot on Friday. The bats are starting to come along. They've underachieved early on in the year. There's some guys I know in Vegas betting them to make the playoffs, get on a run to get a wild card. I'm going to be on them at a pick 'em tonight, too, take Baltimore.
I think the Mets might need to exhume the body of Tommy Agee to turn this thing around. I'm not sure what's going to do it. Horrendous results against a Pittsburgh Pirates team that appeared to be dead and buried. Even oddly losing the majority of games that they've started Paul Skeens in, which when we started the show last year, we were riding Skeens in every ball game, and great success. In spite of the fact that eventually, as you say, the odds makers always find a way to balance things out because they're not necessarily as in favor of people winning as we might be.
Right.
Where all of a sudden you're playing in a prohibitive odds, and that one loss is particularly devastating. All right, one final thing here, because
Sure.
and I'm glad I have you on. I mean, to me, you're like the Pele of soccer handicappers. I've been maintaining that this whole thing with Messi, he lives here in South Florida, and obviously worldwide, such a popular figure. They actually had some people show up in Atlanta for this game. The stands had been largely disguised with empty seats. The fans weren't turning out at all. They show up 65,000 strong to watch this. What I think is like a horseshit league, the MLS. I don't know how you feel about that, but
Mhm.
I mean, this is literally a guy playing a man among boys, a guy still with world class ability, or some of it, going against amateurs, essentially. And so everybody's raving about the play of Messi in the MLS. Now he gets in there against PSG. They hammer Inter Miami CF 4-0, which is the equivalent of 60-0 in a football game. What do you make of any of this activity, and what kind of prelude is this in terms of firing up your ambitions to make money on the World Cup?
One, I think the World Cup is the number one bet sport in the world, an event in the world. So I think it's great that it's going to be held here. I think just like anything else in '94, there wasn't a real big boost for American soccer for the national team there was after the World Cup. I got a sneaky suspicion with with Inter Miami making the second round of this tournament and emphasizing they made $21 million by getting to the round of 16. That helps the league. This is going to be pulling names and pulling players away from their club teams there. Who's going to dump the billions of dollars that we're going to have after this World Cup into American soccer? When we got Pele over here and Franz Beckenbauer back in the 70s, the NASL was drawing maximum crowds everywhere. That's what we need. We need to get named players coming over, trying out the U.S., and seeing if we can compete. I'm sure they're going to be blocked by a lot of these European teams and leagues that are prominent now because of world access to information. We're all familiar with what these leagues and teams are doing. But I saw this coming. So PSG was 5-10 on the money line, a three-way bet, which is unheard of in this game. So everybody knew this would happen. The over-under was 3.5 team goals, which I had, so I hit by 4. And I had the first half over 1.5, figuring they would blow them out in the first half. It was 1-0 into the 35th minute. Thought I was going to lose. Ended up traveling around, took the game off the air, and ended up getting at halftime and seeing 4-0 and had a smile on my face. So it's just that we can't compete. Our top 2 or 3 players are good enough to play against PSG. The bottom 8 aren't good enough to play in that level, and that's really what it is. PSG is world-class team, and it's it. And the fun part of this is going to be for Americans to watch as we get further on, and the Bayern Munich plays PSG, second ever World Club Championship. This should be fun, and we'll see the draw. We will see if we could sell out these stadiums for a quarterfinal or semifinal or finals game. I think we have a semifinal down here in Miami, which I'd love to attend if you can get a ticket. But the Brazilian match yesterday was had a pretty good crowd in Philadelphia Saturday. Palmeiras against Bonfogo. So, I mean, these are teams that I don't recognize either, so I'm just finding it and watching it. But as a soccer fan, it's high-quality soccer. On the other way, for a betting standpoint, there's a very interesting thing going on in CONCACAF. So we had 2 major underdogs advance. And really the reason why is I believe, like anything else, the pressure falls on the big team, the favored team, the team that should advance, the team with all the expectations. So we had Panama, who's notoriously played some World Cups, has been a good team, going up against Honduras. Honduras lost 6-0 to Canada earlier on in a game in a match earlier on, and you think that no team that lost 6-0 has ever advanced this far in a tournament. Well, what happens? They change the rules. Instead of overtime being played 2 15-minute halves to play, they go right to penalty kicks. Where does the pressure fall on? That team that should win. You could see it in these young kids' eyes. And sure enough, Honduras wins in penalty kicks, and you get them as a plus 230 team to advance. I think it ended up going off at plus 290. There's a win there because you want to get a tie. Then you had it happen yesterday with Canada. Canada, prohibitive favorite, laying 360, laying 400 on the overtime, and then it gets to penalty kicks. Canada gives up a late goal, gets the penalty kicks, and Guatemala beats Canada. Shouldn't happen. Happened yesterday, U.S. and Costa Rica. Same thing was happening. We missed a couple penalty kicks, came down to a pressure kick for Costa Rica. They missed. U.S. advances very luckily. So to me, if now you have Mexico playing Honduras, Guatemala playing U.S., why not take a tie and the other team to advance and take a shot? You're going to get 6 and 7 and 1 because I think once the pressure falls on these teams, you never know. But I do think U.S. and Mexico will advance. But just the way the style of betting and the way they changed it, I didn't realize that they weren't playing overtime. And I started analyzing this thing, thinking pressure on these teams, the penalty kick. So it's something to watch if you're thinking about betting soccer, to just say it's you lose that 30 minutes where these teams are winning. If you look at all these other matches, that extra 30 minutes, the better team usually comes up in overtime when they get their wake-up call that they're tied after 90 minutes. So just a fun way of looking at it.
I'm betting a draw in every game. I'll take
There you go.
Draw in every.
Take the big price. Yep. You're making money.
That would be my approach for sure. As you know, I know nothing about soccer and still maintain it was a game devised by a mutant society with no arms. But that being said, if I was going to start dabbling in this, I'm following your picks because you have some passion for this thing. And
I'll send them to you as we get to the World Club semifinals. Should be interesting.
Yeah, I have no idea what all these tournaments are either. Seems like there's no regular season in this sport. It's just cockamamie constructed tournaments where I didn't even know what Miami was doing in this club tournament thing, and certainly they proved that they didn't belong in there with the big boys once they got to that round of 16. Mike, always a pleasure, man. You have a great day. We'll talk to you again on Thursday, and it's a big week, of course, with the 4th of July, and we'll have some more thoughts on all the different things going on in sport. As always, a pleasure, my friend. We'll see you on the next edition of the show. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. Thank you.
All right. That's Mike Jones, ladies and gentlemen. We'll join you again tomorrow. And thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you tomorrow on the Tuesday edition of Bury Your Bookie.